Do you want to know what separates the top 3% of print-on-demand sellers from everybody else in the market? And it has nothing to do with talent, being able to trace trends, or even knowing how to go viral. Because I built a 7-figure store by just following 5 extremely boring things that most people completely skip over. And we're going to be covering these in the order that I learned them myself so that they will be the easiest for you to implement in your own business. And rule number 1 is the 95-5 rule. And that is that 95% of success actually happens in the shadows through consistent, repetitive action. And only 5% of that effort ever surfaces to be shown in the spotlight. And when I started out, my only basis of comparison for running a real business was the things that I saw online, like the flashy Instagram posts or YouTube videos where it's screenshots and click a couple of buttons and, you're off to the races. And that's what I was really expecting, maybe slightly more effort than that, but relatively, that's where I thought I should be spending my time. And so I got confused when I showed up to work on my business each day, just doing the flashy things like checking the dashboards or, maybe making a few posts on social media, and literally nothing was happening. And so I felt like I was doing something wrong when I started to work on, the more monotonous work or the more repetitive tasks, such as one of the most important ones when it comes to print on demand, uploading 7 new designs per day, which is well documented as one of the key characteristics or habits rather that the top 1% of sellers all have in common. Because once I started doing this, it allowed me to do a number of different things. First and foremost, obviously, it grew my product catalog far faster than I ever was before when I expected success to come from throwing up a handful of products at most. I thought that once the Shopify store was filled, that meant I should start seeing sales roll in. But obviously, nothing was further from the truth because the first batch of my designs were, quite honestly, pretty low quality, which makes complete sense. I was not experienced. I had not put in the repetitions, just like anything else in life. There's a lot of practice. 95% of the effort goes into the back end. It's just like Kobe Bryant, who's one of the perfect role models for this, who one of the most prolific basketball players in the history of the sport very famously talks about that he did not bank on himself being more skilled or showing up and getting luckier than the rest of the players. What he was banking on was the fact that he would show up and warm up before the warm up, and that he was just simply putting in more hours over a long enough period of time than anybody else in the league. And so if one of the all-time greats is telling us literally straight from their own mouth that success does not come from just showing up and hoping to be exceptionally gifted, it comes from all of the day in and day out practices, rinse and repeat repetition, then that's exactly what the rest of us need to do. And then once I finally settled into a routine and within the context of print on demand that was specifically making at least 7 new designs per day, I started to learn rule number 2, and that is to use discomfort as a form of motivation. And what this simply means is that people change when the pain of staying the same, staying right where they are, becomes greater than the pain of change. And when I was first starting out building my first business, I was working full-time at Amazon. I was working as a manager in one of their warehouses on night shift, doing 12-hour days, 4 days out of the week. And so my average day was I would wake up around 4 p.m., drive an hour to work, and clock in by 6 p.m. to not get out until 6 a.m. the following morning. Then I would drive another hour home and then put in 3 to 4 hours of work on the business before falling asleep for 4 to 5 hours just to rinse and repeat the whole cycle again. And it was extremely easy at this time for me to slip into a mindset of woe is me, nobody understands the struggles that I'm going through and nobody has it as tough as I do. And believe me, I had all of those thoughts. But the fact of the matter was none of those thoughts were serving me, and none of those thoughts were helping me to achieve escape velocity to get out of my current situation. And it wasn't until I realized that if I don't make a massive shift, then nothing is going to change. And that I was very realistically looking at what the entire rest of my life was going to look like. And with that thought in mind, I was able to fully capitalize with rule number 2. And that is allowing the discomfort that I was feeling to not be something that pushed me down, but rather raised me up and acted as yet another driver to push me towards my goal and build the future that I was dreaming of. So this sparked me into urgent, massive action, but honestly, most people avoid discomfort like the plague because we're kind of conditioned to do exactly that. So the point of it is this: if you are currently feeling discomfort and you are unsatisfied with how things currently are in your life, take it from me that it can be like one of the either most limiting beliefs or it can be one of the most empowering. And empowering insofar as it shows that you are capable of so much more than what you are currently experiencing, only if you are willing to go out and get it. Which sounds great and all, but obviously discomfort fades as success starts to come. What keeps you really going in the long term is belief. And that is rule number 3 that took me probably the longest out of any of these to learn. And rule number 3 is the power of belief. And now this is not the secret where just manifest and it'll come true, but what this comes down to is I have yet to meet a single person in my life or through the community who has had really low expectations or belief about what they are capable of, who then just magically skyrockets up and far exceeds their own expectations. And a perfect example of this is that a lot of the most successful students who have come into WeScale have sent us a message or post in the community before they even get started and say, I can't wait to be one of your success stories, or I can't wait for the day that ... And they are already placing it out there like into the universe. Again, this is not some secret manifestation type thing, but they've already like essentially defined for themselves what they are shooting for. And you can tell in the language that they are using that they believe it is possible. And then to make this even more powerful, having absolute certainty around a goal that this is non-negotiable. This is not up for interpretation. Maybe this will, maybe this won't, but rather come hell or high water, I have burned the boats. There is no turning back. I am going to make this work no matter what. And I think sometimes people think that's the kind of thing that you're either born with or you're not, but it's really not. I've known lots of people who were super unmotivated, did not really have high expectations of themselves, and then something happens, whether it's they hit rock bottom or they have an epiphany, whatever you want to call it. They have a moment of realization that the way they are continuing with things can go on no longer, and a massive change has to happen. But the good news is that we don't have to wait for rock bottom to institute that kind of change in ourselves. There's a very simple exercise that I love to do occasionally that really helps solidify this and reshape my mindset around what I'm capable of without having to experience some horrible falling out or rock bottom type moment. And the short version of this exercise that I highly encourage everybody to do when you have a few spare moments is this. I want you to write down exactly where you are right now in your life, and not just in business, but in all areas. When it comes to your health, your wealth, your relationships, and your business and personal development, write down 2 to 3 sentences about where you currently think you are in each of those areas. Then I want you to write down where you think you'll be if you change absolutely nothing about any of those areas. No personal development, no improvements, no self-discipline, no hard decisions made, and certainly no consistent effort and sacrifice. What does our life look like 5 years from now? And really sit with that. Then do the same thing, but write, what does my life look like 10 years from now? Then what does my life look 20 years from now? Then finally, what does my life look if I have done literally nothing different from this point forward for the next 30 years? Where am I? And the pain of doing that is normally so visceral that it can almost simulate the feeling of being at rock bottom, that holy shit, I cannot imagine being at that point in 30 years. And what this effectively does for us is it just blasts out of the way any self-delusion or self-talk that we have or justification about why it is okay for us to continue the way that we are and to not believe that we are not capable of so much greater. Because the place that we are heading to without that belief is so incomprehensibly terrible that something absolutely must change, and not just a minor change, something massive. And then to complete the exercise, go the opposite. Write where you are right now, and then what happens if you go the other direction? What happens if you make improvements in your life and you commit to the things that you're imagining for yourself? What does your life look like then 5 years down the road? Then what does it look like 10 years down the road? Then 20, then 30, with just 1% incremental improvements and a belief that you have the ability to make a positive, lasting change in your own life. What does it look like 30 years down the road? Then when you have those two complete polar opposites in your mind, it paints a stark contrast of the cost of inaction and having a lack of belief in yourself. Then at the end of the exercise, it becomes abundantly apparent that there is no other possible choice but to give your absolute all to whatever it is that you're imagining for yourself. And then as your belief grows, you start to realize that your time becomes your most valuable asset because we have no time to waste when it comes to achieving what it is that we're setting out for ourselves. And that's where rule number 4 comes in. And that is the 1 in, 2 out rule. And what this means is that for every new thing that we take on, we want to remove 2 low leverage tasks. We need to value our time above everything else. And this is something that I did not start doing for years into my business because I wasn't really bringing in much money. So I thought my time is not that valuable. So it doesn't really matter if I spend my time on whatever, like it doesn't really add up to much anyway. And I didn't realize this lesson for myself until the first time that we had our very first scaling store, where it felt like Christmas Day and the sales were skyrocketing. We were doing $10,000, $20,000 per day. Now, this was after 5 or 6 failed Shopify stores and years of effort, so it was far from an overnight success by any stretch. But at that point, I realized that with the amount of money that we were making on a literal hourly basis, like I need to clear my schedule of everything. Everything that I was doing previous, besides whatever is directly fueling these sales coming in, I need to unequivocally just purge it from my schedule. Which then begs the question, if that's the realization that I have once the money finally starts coming in, why wasn't I acting that way before that? Because if those were the activities that were going to continue the cash flow coming in, those were also the same activities all along that would have caused it to come in the first place. Now, I totally get it. It can be a little daunting to identify like, okay, great, put my time into the most important activities. What are those things? Well, that's a perfectly valid question. And it's a question that you should sit with and analyze and just essentially self-coach yourself by asking over the weeks and months that you're working on your business, am I working on the number one activity in the business? And if I didn't have to be an expert from the very beginning, but if I was armed with literally just that one question and I just asked myself that on a daily basis, it would have started to repeatedly beat it into my own brain so often that if I'm asking a question all the time, I'm eventually going to start to learn the answers to it. And finally, the rule that would have sped up the process for me exponentially more than anything else is to stop hustling and start building, which when I started out, I was jumping from opportunity to opportunity, just spinning my own wheels, convincing myself that I was a hardworking entrepreneur because I was just showing up and grinding, putting in long hours every single day. I should have reframed grinding as basically the input for what the actual goal is, which is productivity, which is building something. And activity, just showing up and doing random stuff each day, jumping from thing to thing, is not productivity. It's actually the opposite. It's just self-delusion. Now, the question is, how do you know the difference? How do I know if I am just hustling versus actually being productive or building something of real value? It's really quite simple. Just simply settle down, take a deep breath, and focus on one thing for an extended period of time. And from my own experience, the times that I was hustling was the times that I was the deepest in the weeds. I was hyper fixated on the smallest details that honestly really did not matter. What I should have been doing was zooming out to a 10,000 foot view. And as I'm learning everything and like going through the motions, keeping a keen eye on, okay, this thing that I'm about to work on, where does this fit into the overall business? So like, for example, if we're building a print on demand brand and I am working on my Shopify store and I'm fixing the product page, or maybe I'm fixing the section at the bottom of the product page. So like in the weeds, obviously we need to work on all areas, but at the very least, have a keen understanding of why I am doing that. I am doing this because that is going to help increase our conversion rate. And then that begs the question, back to the previous rule that we just learned, is this the number one opportunity in the business right now? Is this the best use of my time? And then the way we answer that is, well, is my conversion rate currently suffering? Do I not have sales coming in? And if the answer is no, I don't have sales coming in, then great, continue working on it. But if the answer is yes, we do have sales coming in, then why the hell am I working on it? And that's a minor example of it. The more egregious example that I did too many times is shifting focus from opportunity to opportunity, jumping from one store to the next, from drop shipping to print on demand to whatever. Like, settle on one opportunity and realize that any opportunity that you hear out there has some legitimacy to it. Every opportunity can work. It's just a matter of if I am willing to commit myself to the long term and see it through and have clear focus on where I'm going, long enough to actually bring it to reality. So if you want to rise above the 97% who just quit or stall out completely, it comes down to this. Obsess over the boring work. Let your discomfort become your fuel. Master your mindset. Learn to buy back your time and stop hustling and switching from opportunity to opportunity, and finally give your all to one thing and really start building. Because at the very least, this is how I built freedom for myself, and hopefully that's how you can too. And so if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to learn a lot more about how we build these businesses, then click the link in the description to get access to our free 31+ hour course, where we go through everything that we talked about in extreme detail, down to the ads, how to set up your store, and create high quality products. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.